Hello, it's me, Bookwormy, and me, Valerie Monroe, and we're going to continue with Journey to Nagwanis. If you remember yesterday, Brogden had just met a fairy. That's right, he met a fairy named Nixie, and we found out that she had just a little bit of pixie dust left, of fairy dust left, and she was going to maybe grant a wish for him to get wings because he thinks wings would make his life a lot easier. He'd be able to fly back up to the swale in a lot shorter time than just walking up. Let's see if he gets the wings. Let's see if he does. She uncorked the bottle and began to tip it over. Wait, Brogden said, holding up his hand to stop her. What is it? Will the wings be permanent? He asked. And permanent means like, will they be there forever? Although adding wings to his body was a truly wonderful idea, it seemed to him to be a serious decision. Oh, yes, she replied, and removing them is quite painful, so I've heard. Brogden tried to picture all the ways his life would be easier with wings. Chores, travel, not to mention the pure fun of it. He tried to imagine what his aunts would say. Aunt Gladys would probably declare them frivolous. Aunt Hazel would see the benefits, such as being useful for following butterflies and birds. But ultimately, it was his decision. I think I'll love having wings, he declared. I think you will too, agreed Nixie. Now, just close your eyes and think of how happy you will be once you are flying through the air. Nixie hovered over him, opened the bottle, and the silvery, almost translucent sparkles fell out like gentle snowflakes. They caught in his hair, on his clothes, and clung to his face. A warm feeling came over him, and then he felt an odd, tingly sensation in the middle of his spine. He couldn't see the wings, but he could feel them sprouting. As they grew, he knew they would be much larger wings than Nixie's. They would have to be, he reasoned. He weighed much more than the tiny fairy. Brogden could feel the wings becoming part of him. Blood rushed into them, and they began to undulate slowly back and forth. And as they grew stronger, they fluttered faster and faster. And then he lifted off. I'm flying, cried Brogden. It's delightful, isn't it? Nixie exclaimed. Oh, it most certainly is. They soared all around the entrance to the drain pipe. Nixie showed Brogden how to fly forward and backward, how to turn right and left, and how to land and take off again. To his surprise, he just had to lean a certain way, and the wings did the rest of the work. I think I'm ready to head off, he proclaimed after he successfully demonstrated that he could glide to a smooth stop. He wished he had a way to show his appreciation for the wonderful gift she'd given him. The only item of value he had was the gold nugget, but he wanted to offer that to Finley's wife. I wish I had, something to give you, he told her. Oh, don't be silly, Nixie giggled and shook the bells on her ankles. And then she flew off, and she was gone. Brogden sailed over the drain pipe, and he reached the point where it connected with the swale. From that point on, he followed the swale as it twisted and turned upward. The wings made all the difference. He covered many times the ground that he would have had on foot. The night sky grew steadily darker as he flew on. He didn't dare go too high, lest he lose his way. He hovered only a few feet above the water. Even so, he gained a new perspective of the magnificence of the swale itself, not only its construction, its graceful curves and majestic banks, but also in its absolute importance in the area. He saw many creatures, either traveling in busy waters or using its resources. A family of red-winged blackbirds was just wrapping up what seemed to be a day's worth of scavenging wet leaves. The parents were successfully trying to coax their two youngsters out of the swale. And the little ones were too distracted with a game of tug-of-war with cockleburs. They plucked them from the swale and then rose into the air, pulling at the plant with their tiny little beaks. Further on, two young jumping mice were bouncing up and down on the edge of a rock ledge. Seed pod helicopters from a nearby maple tree were piled up between them, and they were taking turns dropping them from the stone into the water. They squeaked gleefully as the helicopters spun before landing. Across the bank, an elderly squirrel stood angrily on another large rock. His tail flicked wildly at them. "Stop throwing those," the squirrel scolded them. "You're going to clog the swale. Stop it at once." A furry head popped up from a nearby pile of grass and leaves. It was the mother of the mice. "Oh, go away, you old grump, and mind your own business. Let the kids have some fun." Then she shook her four-fingered paw at him. "Completely irresponsible," he yelled back. "In case you forgot, some of us have a longer lifespan than you and will depend on this swale for years to come. We feed on the nuts and seeds that flow into the water. No clogging." "Well, I never," clucked the mouse mother. "That is absolutely the rudest thing I've ever heard." Her teeth chattered furiously. "Your reckless children are ruining our ecosystem," he chattered back, stomping his feet in disgust. Brogden flew over them just as the mouse mother was shaking her long tail. "Life is short, my dear children. Play all you want," she called to the youngsters. "Let the helicopters fly. Let them fly." She cut off as she spied Brogden overhead. "What in the world?" she cried. "He's flying, Mama! He's flying!" The mice squeaked and pointed at Brogden. Brogden grinned and waved to him as he passed. In a matter of minutes, what would have taken him a full day of walking at least, the willow came into view. He would have known he was approaching it anyway. He saw elongated yellow leaves below him, which formed a carpet below the willow's trunk. The same thing had happened in the spring, only with catkins. The willow was continually dropping things. He leaned over to the side, just as Nixie had taught him, and flew over to the great tree. It would have taken him hours to scale the grooved brownish-green trunk. His new wings allowed him to flutter upward very quickly. He flew outside of the loosely hanging branches so he wouldn't become entangled in them. And his heart gave a leap when at long last he saw the eagle's nest. If you remember from the beginning of the story, remember when he landed in that eagle's nest? It had seemed like an impossible, insurmountable dream, returning to Finley's wife. Yet here he was. He landed on a limb and ran down the length of it to where the nest lay, near the trunk. "News! I have news!" he cried as he ran. He was perhaps a foot from the nest when he noticed. It seemed too quiet. Surely someone should be calling back to him. Someone should certainly be peering over the side of the interwoven branches. A prickle of fear ran down his spine. Something was terribly wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. His instincts proved correct. The nest was empty. Not a trace of Finley's wife or child remained. The only things Brogden saw were wisps of dead weeds, grasses, moss, and a few eagle feathers that lined the bottom of the nest. They fluttered softly in the night breeze. He was too late. And that's the end of that chapter. What's the matter? I'm in shock. I can't believe it. All that work. And he came there to tell them the good news and they're gone. I don't know where they are. Can you find out where they are? Finley's wife and his little baby? I can. Could you read more of the story so we can find them? I will, but not today. Please join us tomorrow for another part of Journey to Nagwanis. See you then.